Hi everyone, and welcome to another First Chapter Friday. My name is Fernanda, and today we'll be reading Leeva at Last. And this book was written by Sara Pennypacker. Now, for all of you who are fans of the book and the movie Matilda, let me tell you, you will be a fan of this book. I'm going to read the quick summary because it's short, sweet, and simple, and it really encapsulates the book. What are people for? That's the burning question on the mind of Leeva Thornblossom. Fame, says Leeva's mom, the mayor of Nutsmore. Money, says her dad, the town treasurer. With the help of an orphaned badger, a risk-averse boy in a hazmat suit, and the town's librarians, Leeva sets off to discover her own answer, setting off a chain of events that will change Nutsmore forever. All right, let's get started with the first chapter. Chapter 1, At First. Leeva Thornblossom flew outside the instant she heard the Nutsmore Weekly thunk against the door. Fetching the newspaper was the only time her parents permitted her in the front yard. Ignoring the paper, she jumped off the step and waded through the weeds to the towering hedge that surrounded her yard. There, she knelt and cautiously worked her hands into the sharp, needled branches to open a sight line. Whoever delivered the paper was long gone, as always, but her eyes swept the sidewalk and yes! She was in luck today, a woman gripping a little boy by the hand approaching from the right. Leeva scarcely blinked as they drew near. First, she would call out a bright hello. Then, when the woman located her in the hedge, she'd add, well, this was the hard part. When Leeva had always ached to say to someone was, I am here, and you are here. But somehow, those words seemed too important to call through a hedge. Besides, what would she say next? Just as the woman reached the edge of Leeva's yard, she scooped up the toddler and crossed the street. Again, why do people always do this? As if avoiding an invisible barbed wire fence? Crestfallen, Leeva watched the woman hurry past on the far sidewalk, the little boy jouncing on her hip until she was out of sight. Better luck next week, she told herself as she plobbled back to pick up the paper. There on the step, she flipped through it and looking for the Improve Your Vocabulary column filler. There was never actual news in the paper, but a new word, complete with definition. Every week, at least she had that. Before she found it, though, a headline caught her eye. And reader, for the first time ever, Leeva saw actual news. Nutsmore announcing opening day of school for children 6 and over. Well, she practically toppled over into the doorway in her shock. Her town had built a school, and since she was somewhere between 8 and 9, not knowing her birthday, she had never been able to calculate her age exactly. She would be going to this school. At last, it was out into the world for her. In only she checked the announcement 5 weeks and 3 days. She would tell her parents after dinner. When they were in the least rotten of the moods, they simmered in all day. Wait, that's silly, she chided herself out loud as she ducked through the briars and went inside. Her mother was Nutsmore's mayor, and her father was its treasurer. Surely they already knew about this new school. Then why hadn't they told her? Was it possible they were planning to surprise her? On the soap opera, she watched The Winds of Our Tides. The Cleverton family always made a big deal of revealing joyous news to their twin daughters. For you, darlings, ta-da! Granted, this kind of parent-like behavior was wholly unlike her own mother and father, but there was a first time for everything. It was hard to wait for them to get back from work. Leeva solved the bookkeeping problem her father had left her and signed it with flourish. She sharpened the toes of her mother's shoes and rushed through the rest of her regular duties. Then she threw herself into the exercises on vim and vigor at any age, with extra vim and vigor, and turned on The Winds of Our Tide with a new, warm sensation of connection. Those twin Cleverton daughters attended school, and now so would she. Unfortunately, though, today the show opened with the scene that Leeva always dreaded. This scene was so upsetting, she usually closed her eyes when it occurred. Today, she kept them open. "Bedtime," the Cleverton parents called. When the twins scampered up obediently, the parents patted their daughters' heads and hugged those girls so tightly you'd think they were hurtling off into outer space instead of climbing into side-by-side beds, each with its own pretty quilt. The soap opera parents squeezed those girls as if they couldn't bear to be away from them for a single night. They squeezed them as if they were precious. Watching it now, an odd cry accidentally escaped Leeva's throat, something between a gasp and a wail. She snapped off the television, then she carried the Nutsmore Weekly to her thinking spot, which was the place between two cabinets where a dishwasher was to be until her parents sold it, noticing that Leeva had grown tall enough to reach the sink. Leeva did her best brain work in this empty spot. Right from the first day it had appeared. On that day, she sunk to the floor in shock. If she spent, say, half an hour a day doing dishes for the next 10 years, she'd be at a sink of a total, even so young, she calculated easily 109,560 minutes. Then something worse struck her. Her parents had traded those 109,560 minutes of hers, minutes they might have spent enjoying her company, for only $50. Her parents don't find me very valuable, was the depressing conclusion she'd drawn. Today her thoughts were more cheerful. School! Finally, out into the world! As she sank down cross-legged with the newspaper, before turning to stare at the miraculous announcement again, she hunted down the improve your vocabulary word, deluxe, notably luxurious or someplace, or a superior kind. The word was good enough to produce a tingle, which only happened with the best of them. When her parents' car crunched into the driveway at 6:20, she got up. Gazing into the refrigerator, she heaved a sigh. Didn't a night like this call for a celebratory dinner? Maybe even a meal for herself? But no, all she saw was the same grim stuff she'd seen every day since her parents had decreed her big enough to prepare their food. She hadn't made us any richer. She hasn't made us any more famous. She might as well serve our meals, had been their exact words. Reader, let's pause for a moment and have a look inside this fridge to see what caused her deep sighs. Food in the Thornblossom household fell into two categories, neither of which would have been labeled deluxe. Leeva's father bought only from the cheap-o depot grocery warehouse, and only what was moldering on their rock-bottom sale shelf. Mostly, this was Cesaroni, Chezzaroni bore a glancing resemblance to macaroni and cheese, except that the macaroni and cheese were indistinguishable from each other, and they were both indistinguishable from the box. So even when you followed the instructions perfectly, what you ended up with was a flavorless, cardboardy mash that smelled powerfully of feet. Once a month, Mr. Thornblossom had Leeva bake up dozens of their food bricks, thereby reducing the cost of turning on the oven, and stack them on his side of the fridge. He ate them night and day. The items on her mother's side were quite different. Celebrities This Week magazine was filled with famous people dining on trendy dishes, and Mrs. Thornblossom purchased them all. Last week, an actor had been spotted in a restaurant smacking her lips over an eel custard with boar's knuckle jelly. And so that's what Leeva was sighing at right now. She had managed to subset on the leftovers from her parents' meals, but she was hungry all the time. She was hungry now, and she would be just as hungry when she fell into bed. She prepared her parents' plates and brought them into the living room right on time at exactly 6:40. 2 television sets blared across the room. Leeva's father was turned to Money Talks, tapping the figures that flashed across the screen into his calculator. Her mother staring hang-jawed at Celebrities Tonight. Leeva set the plates on the trays in front of them, crawling on her hands and knees so as not to disturb their viewing, and then sat on her stool in the corner to wait. Reader, we'll take a break here too. Regrettably, you have to meet Leeva's parents. And that's the end of the first chapter of Leeva at Last. I hope it caught your attention. It's a really great read. Again, if you love the story of Matilda, you're going to enjoy this one. Until the next time for another First Chapter Friday, I'll see you guys soon. Bye.